What is the biggest threat to our society today? Is it political corruption? The rise of technology and AI? Or is it something more insidious, more dangerous, and something we don't often talk about? Something that quietly erodes our foundations from within? Stupidity. The things we fail to address, the ignorance we allow to fester, are we tearing at the fabric of what holds us together? And if you think I'm being dramatic, stick around. We're about to dive deep into one of the most profound thinkers of the 20th century, Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a man who understood that stupidity, in its most toxic form, could be the catalyst for humanity's destruction. Welcome to today's video, where we're going to explore a dark yet undeniable truth. Stupidity is one of the greatest threats to society. And to understand this, we must look at the insights of a man who saw firsthand the catastrophic consequences of ignorance and moral failure. A man who was fighting against the rise of evil in the 20th century, Dietrich Bonhoeffer. What if I told you that the greatest peril to civilization isn't a natural disaster or a terrorist attack, but rather something much closer to home, something we all encounter every day? It's ignorance, manifested in decisions that go against common sense, reason, and morality. It's the refusal to question, the inability to critically think. And in a world where misinformation spreads like wildfire, it's becoming more dangerous than ever. Bonhoeffer saw this coming, and in his life, he warned us about this very thing. Chapter 1. Who was Dietrich Bonhoeffer? Before we dive into Bonhoeffer's ideas, it's important to understand who he was, because his life and his choices are a powerful lesson for us today. Born in 1906 in Germany, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a brilliant theologian and a deeply committed Christian. But he was not just a fan of religious faith, he was a man of action, and his resistance against Adolf Hitler and the Nazi regime is one of the most profound acts of courage in modern history. Bonhoeffer grew up in a well-educated family, with a father who was a prominent psychiatrist. His early life exposed him to intellectual and academic rigor. But it wasn't just his family that shaped him, it was his deep faith in Christ, which later fueled his moral actions and in the face of rising evil in his country. In the 1930s, as Adolf Hitler rose to power, Bonhoeffer was confronted with a devastating choice. He could have stayed silent, as so many others did. He could have ignored the mounting horrors around him, choosing the path of safety and comfort, but he didn't. Bonhoeffer knew that Hitler's regime posed an existential threat to humanity, not just Germany. It was a threat to that very moral fiber of civilization itself. Bonhoeffer was not just a theologian with lofty ideas. He was deeply involved in resistance efforts. His Christian convictions compelled him to act. He was not willing to accept the growing tide of evil without doing everything in his power to stop it. He became a key figure in the Confessing Church, a movement that opposed the Nazi-influenced state church. This church, led by the Nazis, sought to align Christian teachings with the ideals of the regime. But Bonhoeffer rejected this, understanding that to support the Nazis was to be complicit in the destruction of truth, morality, and human dignity. Bonhoeffer's resistance didn't stop at words. In 1943, he became involved in a plot to assassinate Hitler, part of the German resistance movement known as the Stauffenberg plot. Though the plot ultimately failed, Bonhoeffer's willingness to risk everything to confront the evils of the regime exemplified his commitment to fighting stupidity in its most dangerous form, the failure to recognize or confront evil. Bonhoeffer's resistance led to his arrest in April 1943, and after 2 years in a concentration camp, he was executed by the Nazis on April 9, 1945, just weeks before the end of World War II. His life and death embody the very essence of moral clarity and intellectual courage. And as we'll see, these are the very qualities we must summon in our battle against stupidity today. Chapter 2. The root of the problem. Stupidity is a threat. So what exactly do we mean by stupidity? We're not talking about a simple mistake or a harmless lapse in judgment. We're talking about a profound systemic failure of both reason and morality. It's the inability of or unwillingness to understand the gravity of a situation or to act upon knowledge that's readily available. It's the type of blindness that allowed millions to turn a blind eye to the horrors of the Holocaust. And it's the type of blindness that still threatens us today. In our modern age, stupidity manifests in many forms. Whether it's the spread of fake news, the blind following of toxic ideologies, or the refusal to acknowledge science and facts in the face of crises like climate change or a global pandemic. The consequences of ignorance are deadly, and the worst part is that stupidity doesn't always come from a lack of intelligence. It often comes from a refusal to think critically, from laziness, or from emotional bias. Bonhoeffer understood that stupidity could take many forms, but at its core, it was always a refusal to engage with truth. Whether it's a failure to challenge harmful ideologies or a blind allegiance to a dangerous system, stupidity thrives when people choose comfort over moral clarity. It feeds off ignorance and fear, and it's especially dangerous when combined with power. Bonhoeffer's notion of cheap grace is a key concept here. Grace, in his view, wasn't about passive acceptance or turning a blind eye to evil. It was about active engagement with the world, a world that often requires sacrifice and courage to make it right. This idea is crucial when we think about stupidity. It's not just ignorance, it's the willful decision to ignore what's right in front of us. Chapter 3: The Psychology of Stupidity. But why do people refuse to see the truth? Why is it so hard to confront reality, especially when it's staring us in the face? The answer, I believe, lies in the psychology of stupidity. Human beings are not always rational. We're influenced by our emotions, biases, and fears, things that can... One of the biggest problems we face today is confirmation bias, the tendency to seek out information that supports our pre-existing beliefs and to ignore information that challenges them. This cognitive distortion is powerful, and it feeds into the stupidity that Bonhoeffer warned about. When we surround ourselves with ideas that only reinforce what we already believe, we become intellectually lazy. We stop questioning, we stop critically evaluating, and we start accepting things at face value. Bonhoeffer understood this danger in the context of the Nazi regime. As the Nazis manipulated truth and twisted reality, many people fell prey to these lies simply because it was easier to go along with the crowd than to confront the painful truth. In Bonhoeffer's case, this cognitive laziness led to millions of people in Germany either turning a blind eye to the Holocaust or just justifying it based on distorted ideologies. When people stop questioning the moral and logical foundations of their beliefs, they are vulnerable to being manipulated by those in power, and that's when stupidity becomes deadly. Chapter 4: The Dangers of Stupidity Today. Fast forward to today, and the dangers Bonhoeffer warned us about are more relevant than ever. We live in an age of mass misinformation, where truth is often distorted and our moral compass is constantly tested. Think about how easily misinformation spreads on social media. A single tweet or post can spark a firestorm, even if it's based on half-truths or outright lies. And the worst part? Many people don't even care to verify what they share. They just pass it along because it fits their worldview. We see this in every facet of society, whether it's political discourse, climate change denial, or public health crises like the pandemic. Stupidity thrives when we choose to remain uninformed, when we fail to ask tough questions, and when we refuse to listen to those who are trying to present us with the truth. In today's world, misinformation spreads like wildfire. Fact-checking websites are working overtime to keep up, but the echo chambers of social media ensure that falsehoods are amplified and validated by those who refuse to engage with reality. The result is a world where truth becomes subjective, where belief replaces evidence, and where ignorance becomes the foundation of public discourse. Bonhoeffer understood that allowing ideologies to take over our minds leads to moral decay. Just like the German people who stood by while the Nazis carried out atrocities, we, too, can find ourselves in a situation where our values are corrupted by blind loyalty to ideas that contradict reality. Chapter 5: How do we overcome this? So, what can we do? How do we fight against this growing tide of stupidity in society? Bonhoeffer gives us a starting point: the need for active resistance, for moral clarity, and for the courage to stand up against evil, no matter the cost. Bonhoeffer didn't just talk the talk, he walked the walk. He resisted the Nazi regime with everything he had, even when it meant sacrificing his own life. His final writings before his execution in 1945 serve as a powerful reminder of the need for intellectual and moral courage. In the face of injustice, he chose to act, not because it was very easy, but because it was the only right thing to do. If we want to overcome the stupidity that plagues our world today, we need to start by demanding more from ourselves and from others. We engage with difficult questions, challenge harmful ideas, and above all, seek truth, even when it's uncomfortable. We can't afford to be passive, just as Bonhoeffer couldn't. We must be willing to educate ourselves, to confront our own biases, and to engage with the truth, even when it challenges our most cherished beliefs. And we must support others in doing the same. Ignorance is not an acceptable excuse for inaction or complicity. As Bonhoeffer knew all too well, the cost of inaction can be catastrophic. The greatest threat to society isn't a singular event or force, it's a failure to think, to question, and to act with integrity. Stupidity, when left unchecked, becomes a powerful force that can unravel the very fabric of our civilization. But it's not too late. If we learn from history, if we take a page from Bonhoeffer's book, we can confront this danger head-on. Stupidity isn't inevitable, it's a choice, and as long as we choose to confront it, choose to fight against it, and to seek truth and understanding, we can still build a better world. The question is, will we have the courage to act? The choice is ours.